So, as it turns out, there's a follow up to Zombie Abomination called Zombie Atrocity, which some of you may have noticed if you saw the DVD menu that I was showing off in my last video. And to tell the truth, after watching part one, I was strongly tempted to just take the DVD out of the player and add this movie to my stack of things to take to Half Price Books. But then I remembered this little movie called Subspecies, which I said was a movie that I didn't like. But then I watched the second movie and the third movie, and they were much more entertaining than the first one, even though they still weren't good. I never bothered with the fourth one. I don't really care enough. And even at the end of this movie, it turns out that there's a part three, and the DVD only has parts 1 and 2, so that's all I was going to bother watching. I think I've suffered enough at this point. But as it turns out, the second movie is a lot more watchable than the first one, which still isn't to say that it's good. It's a lot like how when the last Twilight movie came out, a lot of people were saying that it was a lot better than the first four movies, but I mean, it's still just a piece of shit that stinks less. Still, getting into the things that I liked about the movie, first of all, I don't know. Usually I start these movies off by uh, saying what the movie's about, but neither one of these really has much going on in terms of plot. And it's a pretty generic zombie story. The government uh, is doing some experiments. The experiments go wrong. Zombies happen. And now you got our movie. Um, Actually, side note, I will admit that they do something a little different with the zombies this time around. Instead of just having these, undead cannibals, the reason that they're tearing people apart is so that they can take their body parts, the ones that are missing from their own bodies, and attach them to themselves. And when they rip out internal organs that they're missing, they usually swallow them to kind of replace them, or at least attempt to do so. So, that was kind of new, I guess. But anyway, one of my biggest problems, as I pointed out in the last video, was that the first movie didn't have that much zombie action going on. And for those who didn't read the description, I kind of fucked up by saying that it was 40 minutes long. It was an hour and 40 minutes, but still, throughout a runtime of 100 minutes, there still was barely like 5 minutes worth of zombie related activity in the movie, which had the word zombie in the title. But in this movie, the undead action is almost back to back. You do get to see a lot more going on here. But it's an extremely low budget film, so the zombies don't look spectacular or anything. They do have some pretty cool looking masks, but they don't move. In fact, I think my favorite of the terrible special effects that they used in this movie was a part where they had this severed head laying on a table, or not laying, it was standing up on a table. And instead of doing what most movies do, where they have the actor stick his head up through a table that has a hole in it, they just put like a rubber head on the table, and they use the same type of special effects that Danebo uses in his series The Annoying Orange, to give faces to fruits. And the best part of it is that his eyes aren't always in sync with each other. Like, one might be wider than the other while he's talking, or they might even be blinking out of sync. Like, he'll say something like, "Oh, you're gonna get it now, pendejo." So I found that more amusing than most of the intentional comedy in the film, which isn't to say that the comedy was as bad as it was in the first movie. I actually thought that this one was funnier, but still, some of the better jokes in it didn't get much of a reaction out of me, other than just they even bring back more shots of urine, supposedly as a gag in this movie. I will admit though, there was one scene where they made it kind of funny, where a guy is being attacked by zombies, and the way that he fends them off is by peeing in their faces. But still, it didn't get a big reaction out of me, except for um, also, as far as some of the stranger characters in this movie go, they do get a lot more to do in this movie, at least in comparison to the first one, you know. Um, I don't know how ESP abilities are really supposed to work, but the psychic character uses these ESP powers to blow some zombies up, and you actually get to see the aliens in this movie. In the first one, there was just like a UFO, and they do attack a couple of people. Um, Although they use CGI, which has, you know, less movement, uh, less expressive movement than a character from a PS1 game. And as for the succubus, you know, she kills a guy and she grows some horns at the end. And for some of you women lovers out there who are wondering, you know, when it comes to the succubus, do you actually get someone who's, you know, nice to look at? I will say she is a really good looking woman. However, she doesn't seem to be much younger than my grandmother. So they didn't even have that going for this movie. And despite the fact that there is more action in it and that there is, you know, slightly better comedy, there are still a lot of scenes between characters that drag on, and there was still a point where I was just thinking to myself, God, are you ever going to end? So, I mean, in the end, like I said, it's better than the first movie, I guess, but it's still not good, and I still wouldn't recommend it. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about Zombie Atrocity. I'm glad that I got through that shit. Now I've got about 100 more movies in this series to go. Pray for me.